But the time has come to broaden the party, to put in place people in shadow positions, and that process begins today, just begins today, with 4 important announcements.
I was at Reform UK event in Westminster where Nigel Farage was unveiling his so-called shadow cabinet. We were expecting surprise names, but instead it was 2 former Tories and people we already knew about, and it remains very much a one-man band, Reform UK.
To the world of business and energy, somebody at the top of this department who's done well himself in the real world. So please welcome to the stage our head of BTE, Richard Tice.
Nigel Farage first introduced Richard Tice, who, lest we forget, was the former leader of Reform before he was essentially told to step down by Nigel Farage. He hasn't been given one of the great heads of state roles that he'd been hoping for. He previously talked about, as a businessman, how he would like to be a chancellor in a Reform government, but he's not got that job. Instead, he has this new merge role for business, trade and energy, and also he will be the deputy prime minister, which is really interesting because in Westminster, the deputy prime minister role is a job you give someone to keep them happy. It's ceremonial more than anything. There is no real extra responsibility that comes with it. He seemed to be fine with it, but he was asked repeatedly during the conference, "Are you happy with this? Are you happy with what's happening?" And his answers were less than convincing.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we need a new super department covering business, trade, energy, including housing.
He is trying to form some sort of new department by bringing energy in. He's a mega Brexiteer, and his speech during it was mainly about how awful net zero was. I think he called it stupid net zero or something along those lines. He's made attacking Ed Miliband a hallmark of his day-to-day, and it's basically trying to get rid of the net zero climate commitments and instead focus on supporting business. Labour would say that you can do both.
The second thing we're looking for is genuine experience, because people like Richard Tice and myself, we've not been in number 10, we've never been on the front line. We need people who've been there.
He does have a lot of business experience, and that was the general theme of the press conference. They kept saying how much experience that everyone there had in the private sector and how Labour had none in its cabinet, and that they'd all worked in the private sector and Labour had instead, done things in councils or in healthcare. So that was the general theme, was that they are supporting business because they are from business.
Taking on the very responsible and important role of Shadow Chancellor is Robert Jenrick.
Great to see Mr. Jenrick come out as the Shadow Chancellor. He talked about how Labour had their approach to the economy was essentially vandalism, which was incredible to hear from someone who was in numerous Conservative governments, including Liz Truss, was a part of her team during the mini budget and also wrongfully approved a housing project for Richard Desmond, which cost taxpayer £40 million. He talked about how awful things were, how people were struggling and people need to be getting by, perhaps forgetting that it was his former party of just a few weeks ago that had delivered 14 years of austerity. So there wasn't like a lot of self-awareness in his performance.
And Zia Yusuf will take on the role of Shadow Home Secretary with, of course, particular reference to that one issue, above all, that has broken the trust of the British public, with manifesto after manifesto just not telling the truth. I'm talking, of course, about both legal and illegal immigration.
Zia Yusuf is a very committed online poster who, as well as the Home Affairs brief he's been given, spends a lot of his time quote tweeting polls to have a go at journalists if they've not put Reform at the top of the poll, not just in percentage, but in the order of the names. He gets annoyed if they're winning the polls but not top of the list, and likes to cry bias. He's also a man who's complained about being in green rooms with other people and says he'd rather not talk to them because they're all liberal elites. His speech today, he talked about how grateful he was to this country, how tolerant it was, how welcoming it was, and how it had been fantastic for his family, but also then talked about how immigration was terrible, and repeated his love of deportations. So he's an interesting character, and one who has said quite a lot about Robert Jenrick. That was put to him and they all just kind of smiled and laughed it off. But there are fractures that could widen as this project goes on.
But we have to be honest. The sheer scale of immigration over the last 3 decades has broken Britain. More people have turned up on our beaches uninvited in the last 7 years than storm the beaches of Normandy on D-Day?
It feels like it's a bit of a sideshow. And I mean, it's worth remembering he's quit the party before. He quit over Sarah Pochin's dumb call for a burqa ban, and then came back to lead their equivalent of Doge. So he's shown he's temperamental. He's shown that he is not completely wedded to reform. And I would expect that to be a problem going forward.
But she will also take on equalities under this brief, which of course means the world of DEI. And I know she's itching to get on with it. Suella.
I don't think Suella Braverman is in any position to be turning down a brief of any kind. This is someone who was sacked for breaching the ministerial code, talked about how immigration was like an invasion, said that flights taking off to Rwanda would be her dream. She is ridiculed by her former Conservative colleagues. She is someone who had leadership aspirations, but none of them took her seriously. They all thought she was an absolute joke. So her having any brief at all is perhaps a great win for her.
And to those universities that have descended into hotbeds of cancel culture, anti-Semitism, and which survive really thanks to the cash of foreign students, and keep conning young people into worthless degrees, reform is putting you on notice.
Suella Braverman's speech did not particularly shock me because she was saying what she has always been saying. She is a culture warrior, and her anger is directed at things that, the very small percentage of population that trans people are, and hitting out at them rather than dealing with the lack of funding for education. She said she wanted to go to universities. She said she would go to war with them for not teaching things that she wanted them to do. So it was an ugly assault from someone who claims to be for free speech.
And it's why a reform government will bring an end to the transgender chaos in the classroom. Social and gender transitioning will be absolutely banned in all schools, no ifs, no buts.
And it was really interesting listening to her speech. The cheers got the loudest. She was asked about, she said that DEI was something that she would be abolishing. She said that they would get rid of the equalities brief on day one. She said, I'm losing part of my job. And that was resoundingly cheered in the room, as were her anti-trans comments. What we didn't hear from her is what she thought about being privately educated and whether she sends her children to private school, because the FT did ask, and Nigel Farage shut down the question and said no one should have to answer that because a large number, I think if not all of them, were privately educated.
And my second question is to you, Suella. You went to a private school that charges £17,000 a year.
Oh dear, you better emigrate, I think. I mean, clearly, it's absolutely appalling. What a
Richard,
terrible human being she must be.
Not at all, not at all. Richard, Nigel, Robert and Zia, I believe, all went to expensive private schools.
Very good, what fun.
What do you say to members of the public who might query your party's commitment and belief in state education? And are you able to confirm whether your children go to state schools?
By the way, I love the FT. It's fantastic. The day after the big Mandelson story broke, your front page politics story was about a reform councillor in Kent. So we'll leave it there.
It's an absolute stunt. There is no guarantee that they keep their seats. There's no guarantee that they are all still together. I mean, Zia Yusuf is not even an MP. And I think it's worth remembering that Zia was saying not long ago that they would be looking far beyond the parliamentary party and people who had political experience for any reform cabinet. They would be looking to business. They'd be looking for people with real life expertise. By giving out these big titles now, there are very few roles left that can go to people who aren't just former Tories. And the question was put to Nigel Farage that the reason he'd given Robert Jenrick the job as Shadow Chancellor, was that because, it's the price for him coming over and defecting. And Nigel Farage kind of dismissed the question, as he's wont to do, and said, I used to be a one-man band, now I've got someone in, you're unhappy. Well, he was very unhappy. He was lashing out throughout the press conference, and he did not like questions over who had got jobs and why.
Last question, Alexander from the Mirror.
Mr. Farage, your candidate, Matt Goodwin, has declined to condemn the endorsement of Tommy Robinson and claims some people born in Britain aren't British. Do you oppose Robinson's support, and do you agree with Mr. Goodwin about Britishness?
I just don't have anything to do with him. And we know where Tommy Robinson's loyalties lie. He's with Ben Habib, or is he with Rupert Lowe? And are they getting together, or do they hate each other? I don't know, I'm very confused. Tommy Robinson can do what he wants to do. away from us, as long as he stays within the law, which doesn't always do. And it's just none of our business, nothing to do with us, nothing to do with the campaign in Denton and Gorton, which is next Thursday, and which is going to be incredibly close.
I asked Nigel Farage about Tommy Robinson's endorsement of Matt Goodwin and about his comments that people born in Britain are not necessarily British based on their ethnicity. Nigel Farage avoided the question. He was also asked about questions about tax for people who are not having children by Matt Goodwin, which is regarded in some quarters as an assault on women. And again, it was difficult for him to answer the question. So it showed that Matt Goodwin is a real problem. And it also, I think, showed nervousness. He was not in a good mood. And they said during the press conference that Reform were 10 to 15 points ahead in the polls, which maybe they were previously, but just today, then their lead is now just 5 points over Labour. They've dropped 3 points. And that could be down to comments from Matt Goodwin. That could be down to any number of comments, actually, from Matt Goodwin. Or it could be down to essentially them becoming a Tory tribute act, which is a line said by Labour and by the Conservatives.